evening, welcome back to the show. I have with me a panelist from the private sector and from government. My name is Beatrice Mboj and I'm your host. We would now like to go into the topic for the day, which is the state of the Gambian economy. And my first question goes to Mr. Samate from the Ministry of Finance. I would like to ask you, what is the state of the Gambian economy as we speak? Thank you.
The economy actually growth declined to 2.1% in 2016 due to policy slippages and election uncertainty, but it's expected to rebound to 3.5% in 2017 and 4.8% in 2018, following the democratic transition in the Gambia. So things are improving. The new government, under the leadership of President Adam Barrow, and the entire cabinet, are carrying out reforms, working with our partners, the World Bank, the IMF, and all our key partners to implement reforms, much needed reforms, for the structural transformation of the economy. That's not to say that there are no challenges. There are challenges. For example, industrial policy suffers from a lack of core infrastructure, and also the issue of, we've been isolated for too long as a country, and now we're not benefiting optimally from regional integration. So all these are part of the reform efforts to reconnect Gambia as part of the main, the global village of countries. So I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samate. I think I'll now like to ask the other panelists if they have anything to add before we go to another question.
Certainly, the performance of the economy as we speak is one where we're beginning to see a return back to confidence in how the economy is shaping up, in terms of how the economy is being managed, and most importantly, we've seen that the donor partners of the Gambia, such as the European Union, the IMF, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, have all expressed support in helping the Gambia to restructure and reshape the economy and put it on the right footing, so that we can begin to deliver on the potential of the economy. Following the transition, after the elections in 2016, which was concluded in the early part of 2017, we have all gotten very high expectations in terms of changes in our lives and livelihoods and our living standards. But I will want to caution that it is too soon for us to begin to see the benefits of all this confidence that we are beginning to see emerge from the economy. However, we would continue to encourage the government to commence institutional reforms as quickly as possible, because we are all aware of the standards of living of the average Gambian over the last 2 decades or so, and I think the expectation is to see improvements in this regard. Of course, this will take some time, but we need to start these things in phases and drips, so that people can begin to have a sense that they are part of the economy, that if they work hard, if they participate in the opportunities that are present, that they will be rewarded accordingly, which will translate into an improvement in their living standards. The challenges that Mr. Samate highlighted are certainly quite visible and evident, and I think the sooner the government begins to lay out the strategies in order to address key sectors like energy, for example, which is crucial, which is pivotal in terms of contributing to the performance of the economy, needs to be given urgent priority. Again, there is need to strengthen the institutions so that they are able to deliver the aspirations of the people and understand their role. And this goes across the three arms of government, the legislature, the judiciary, and most importantly the executive, that have responsibility for developing the economic strategies that hopefully will translate into some life-changing and impactful results for the average Gambian across the board. Thank you.
I'll now invite Mr. Njai to make his remarks.
Thank you, Beatrice. I think one important thing that we have going for us currently is the certainty and stable environment that we have compared to what we endured over the last 2 decades. So this atmosphere really breeds confidence, and I think it allows all stakeholders to play their part towards the common goal of really accelerating economic development. I mean, the fear factor is no longer there, so really it's time for action and really execution, basically. I think if you are able to do this, I mean, we'll see really gains coming through in the short term and medium term. If just the monetary policy committee of the central bank had their last meeting sometime in August, late August, and Mustafa alluded to that in terms of the expectations, in terms of the economic growth projected to be into over 3%. Will that be achieved? Okay, jury is still out on that. Let's hope that we get good rains, and of course, there is no longer interference from the executive. It allows the Minister of Finance and the central bank to really to do their bit and to work towards this common goal. I think the outlook for the tourism too is good, and so really, even we've already had a good name out there for the Gambia in terms of what we went through and the manner in which was we really went through it in a very mature way. So everybody wants to know about the Gambia, and sure you can see really, I hope. We hope that the tourism really would rebound at a big time, coupled with a good agricultural output that should really set the stage for the aspiration to get to this close to 4% in terms of growth. Having said that, I think it's important that, I mean, there's a great deal of visibility by the stakeholders, the Minister of Finance, the central bank, so the population know what they're doing, what we're up to, what is the end game, what are we trying to achieve in the short term. Yes, like I said earlier, we've waited 22 years for this, and so there's a great deal of urgency, and we don't have room to really slow down the pace. So if we do this, and then coupled with, it's not only the central bank or the central bank, then again the private sector has to play some part too. And the focal point here is the GCCI, I think, who should be able to marshal their members towards this common goal. And I think if we were able to do this, we'll really set the stage to achieve this growth of a little over close to 4%, which in these times it's hardly to come by, even in the developed world. Having said that, I think if you look at what came through on the MPC held late August, look at the appreciation of the dalasi against major currencies like the pound, like the US dollar. I think it's only depreciated against the euro only. But you've seen some close to, I think for the US dollar and for the GBP, close to 1% really in terms of appreciation of the dalasi. I mean, it's quite unusual for this time of the year. The rainy season, traditionally you see the dalasi depreciation at a very fast rate. But here we've seen appreciation during the rainy season. Not only to talk about that, they talked about the import cover of 4.2 months. It's impressive. So it's been set out really for us to succeed. So we can't afford to fail really. So I think it's in our hands to really move the dial.
Thank you very much, Mr. Njai. I would like to move on to another question right now. I want to ask Mr. Baboucarr Kane, sitting here as the first Vice President of the Gambia Chamber of Commerce. We always hear this talk about private sector-led growth. What do we understand by this terminology?
Thank you, Beatrice. Certainly, the phrase private sector-led growth has been around for quite some time now. In the world of international development, it is simply the building of private enterprises in order to promote economic development that will translate into reducing poverty for developing countries. I think this is the simple textbook definition of private sector-led growth. Now, in practical terms, this entails a public and a private sector strategic partnership working together in order to deliver the aspirations of the population. And within that context, a private sector-led growth strategy can only be delivered when we have the government putting in place the enabling environment within which the private sector can fully participate and deliver to its maximum potential in terms of new businesses being created, in terms of attracting foreign direct investors, in terms of indigenous Gambian businesses also expanding and growing their businesses, creating jobs, and high quality jobs for that matter, not jobs for job's sake, but jobs that will actually realize meaningful earning potential for the employees. And within this context, all these businesses that are operating in the private sector will begin to contribute more in terms of taxes that they pay to government, which is the primary source of government's revenue in order to continue to also deliver on their programs. Now, in the Gambia, what we have seen in the past is that government was just getting bigger and bigger, whereas the private sector was being squeezed and getting smaller and smaller. And with this new government, what we are seeing is the reverse, and we hope that to continue. In 2016, I was reading from some magazine that the foreign direct investment in the Gambia was a bare $10.9 million in 2015 or 2016. Compare this to personal remittances inflows into the Gambia, which was 180 million US dollars. Now, we need to find ways of channeling these remittances inflows not only to drive consumption, but also for meaningful development in key economic sectors in order to reduce the level of employment and also begin to create new business opportunities in order to ensure that the average earnings for the Gambians beginning to see a rising trajectory. Because if we aspire to become a middle income country within the short to medium term, there is need to address the poverty levels, and this has to start by addressing the issues of unemployment and underemployment. And this can only be achieved by having good businesses, taking advantages that are present in the economy to start up businesses or expand new businesses in order to expand and grow and develop. Within that context, we would expect the government to address key fundamental issues that are required in order for the private sector to realize its full potential. One is energy, because the cost of doing business in the Gambia is being hindered by the high level of, by the high cost of energy, but most importantly, the unreliability of the energy supply, which is costing businesses fortunes, not to mention the damaged business assets and equipment and so on and so forth. The infrastructure, one of which is internet and internet connectivity and also its reliability across the country. At the moment, one can only talk of reliable internet connectivity within the Greater Banjul area. As you expand and begin to go rural, you get varying levels of connectivity. And we were promised that with the ACE coming into being, issues of internet connectivity will become a thing of the past, but we are yet to realize the full potential. And I think this is something that we need to address as quickly as possible in order to harness the full potential of technology in transforming the business of the private sector. The final point that I would want to talk about in terms of public-private sector-led growth is the development of the relevant skills and competencies that are required. What is happening is that the world is changing and it is changing fast. At the moment, we are seeing forces of creative destruction. And what I mean by that is technology is coming in and phasing out jobs that we have taken for granted in the past. Now, as we go into the future, we need to examine our education curriculum to make sure that the content and what we are teaching the next generation of employees of this country will respond to the skill sets that are required in order to take advantage of the advances in technology and other new emerging economic sectors that we are yet to see. But that also will not happen if we don't fix our health sector. Because what they say is for us to drive and grow, we need to have a healthy and vibrant workforce. And we would not be in a position to achieve that if the health sector is not addressed.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'd like to break it down into two phases, really. Number one is about the immediate. Gambia is mainly SME in terms of the led growth really in terms of the business that we have in the Gambia. I think if you look at it from the telcos, the telecommunication companies, and the oil companies, what else? Maybe those who are about to invest in the energy sector. Yes, those we will call big, and maybe the cement industries here, the cement factories here. Apart from that, there is mainly in the SME sector. And for the immediate, what I think we could do, or what can be done, is they are mainly concentrated in the re-export trade. Generally, what comes into the Gambia, about 80% of this get re-exported. So imagine, let's look at it from the agricultural angle, really. If we were to do some value-adding stuff, really, in terms of our agricultural produce, and maybe the drinks that are being imported here, and we turn ourselves into light manufacturing and all those things, we're able to export this ourselves. So we step in and get a share of that cake, really. That makes a whole lot of difference, I think. Then, in addition to that, if you look at the revenue pool for 2016 for the entire banking industry, it was in the region of $80 million. I bet 80% of that is SME. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if we're able to really tap into that and put in policy strategies in place to really help this sector grow, then it's going to be a monumental shift in terms of our development. Having said that, I think we need to go back to basics, getting things right in the first instance. For instance, I think we need to create the capacities in terms of training. I mean, being able to run light manufacturing, the set skills are not there, so we should be encourage more of technical vocation and do it very fast. That's the way you can get an entire mass really into the employment pool, of being employed, gainfully employed. We've talked about agriculture, which continues to be the major share of contribution to GDP. So what can we do to ensure, to make it attractive for the young and middle-aged to go back into agriculture, to make it worthwhile? So I think these are the major things that can be done. We can have strategies can be put in place to really make more development in these areas. But having said that, we need to get the basics, the foundation right. And by that, Babukar alluded to it. It's about the education. I mean, we need to have the right curricula, so that we're able to prepare the population to be employee of the future. Things are moving at a very fast rate, and we are being left behind. So we are having to create that so that people are able to they're adaptable to the changing environment, and become able to adapt to the changes and become employed in the future. It's a must. And this must be reflected in the curricula. And not only that, this must be anchored by discipline. I think that is something that is in short supply, if you ask me. I'm very honest about this. Because where you get discipline and relevance in terms of execution, I mean, then you are halfway through. If we're able to get this in our workplaces, in our homes, in the schools, I think we should be able to really make monumental changes in the way we do business in Gambia and realize the growth in a short time. But we must do this with speed. I think if you ask me, again, I think we've already lost a generation too, in terms of, if you look at when you hear people communicate, I mean, it's for simple communication skills, it is lacking big time. It's so embarrassing when you hear it on the airwaves. I mean, you see people who apply for job and all these things. And these are, coming from the university, we need to focus on quality. It's important because we are not an island. We're dealing with the world. So it's important that we are up there. Yes, we have good people, good representations out there, but then we need to carry along the mass. They must come along too and be able to really rise up to that level. This is key. We must get the school system sorted out, having the discipline at home, in the homes, have a good curricula that will address these issues, and then it makes life a lot easier for all of us. So if we were able to do this, I mean, then we should be home and dry, really, I think.
Thank you very much. I would now invite Mr. Samate, representing the Minister of Finance, to give his reactions.
Thank you, Beatrice, and my fellow panelists, Mr. Njai and Bawukar. The question is, private sector engine of growth. The fact of the matter is this, right? There cannot be, and there will never be any sustainable growth or development without private sector prospering. That's the fact. So both sides need each other. It's the business of the private sector to create wealth creation, and it's the business of government to create the environment, enabling environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samate. I think time is not so much on our side, so we will take the last question, which goes to Mr. Usman Njai. As one of the biggest contributors to GDP, that's the banking sector, how can you be supported to enhance your contribution to the economy?
If you look at it currently, what the Apex Bank is doing, I think the stage is set to really give us the platform and the wherewithal to do what we can do to really help grow the economy. And quite a number. It's about more on financial inclusion, really. How do we get the informal sector, mainly the SMEs, who are not banking, to get them to bank? Can we create the right policy framework, the sensitization, and maybe look at the tax regime itself that at times is hindrance, and so that people are able to declare their wealth, they're able to come and save their money in the bank. It's transparent. I mean, we need to get this huge amount of cash being deposited in the banks. Why can't we not automate the process? I mean, this should be led, of course, I think, by the Apex Bank itself. So, I mean, cost of doing business, it's important these things are brought down. And one important thing is, if you look at it, again, referring to the MPC, Quasi money grew by 24% year on year. That's savings and time deposits. So it's telling you that customers do have money. So the next question is, how do we channel this money, these savings, into, as Bawukar alluded to earlier, into projects, into development programs, into businesses? I think the discussion we should be having as an industry and with the other stakeholders, the Apex Bank as well, is how do we extend lines of credit to SMEs at a very low cost? Do we have funds available that can be channeled to the banks, which banks can actually deploy to the SME sector at a very minimal cost? And of course, with a good recovery process, I mean, bankable projects, we should be able to do something in the light manufacturing. If you look at it in terms of light manufacturing, it's basically, I mean, it's minimal. There is much more we can do on that front. Recently, we've seen some Gambians taking up on the agro processing, really do some value adding. I read somewhere in Forbes magazine, one Gambian got mentioned where he's doing a turnover $1.6 million in agro processing. So we can have many of this, really. So if we're able to have these lines of credit, I mean, if the central bank can access these lines of credit at a low cost from the Bretton Woods institutions, and then we're able to extend this to the wide SME community at a preferential rate, I think we should be able to really, but then it comes along with creating the right capacities, that the loans that are extended to the SME family, they should be able to handle, be able to account for this money, be able to run these businesses in a proper, coordinated, very focused manner. I think we are able to get this, then we should see some accretion, some growth in this area.
Yeah. Thank you, Usman.
Yeah.
Aside of the factors that you have cited, I think we need to have trust between the public and the private sector, which is fundamental. Because it is a very crucial relationship for the Gambia to be in a position to realize the full potential as a nation, its full potential as a sovereign nation. And in this regard, I think there is room for significant improvement in terms of dialogue between the public and the private sector. What we have seen in other countries is that presidents do have councils of economic advisors, the majority of whom would come from the private sector, to make sure that they are able to share their concerns and also share their views in terms of the direction that the economy and that the economy is taking, and also what is happening within their businesses. So I think this is something that I would want to see happen. Of course, leveraging the chamber as the voice advocating for the views of the private sector. Then the second thing that I will want to add is the issue of productivity. Because the GDP growth that we use to measure how we are performing as an economy is basically a measure of the relationship between output that is derived from the labor that is being provided across all sectors of the economy. Now, for us to continue to see our contributions to grow, there is need to invest in the people so that we can begin to ensure that they have what is required in order to produce at the highest level possible, maximizing their potential, if I can put it that way. Because this is the shortest way for us to begin to create meaningful jobs that will assure protection that Mrs. Mboji referred to earlier, and also result in sustainable economic development. The third area that I think we need support on is just the business environment, the basic business environment. I talked about the challenge in terms of energy, in terms of internet infrastructure and connectivity, road networks. In the Gambia, we said agriculture employs about 70 to 75% of the economically active population. But if you measure the productivity, it's 25%, because the majority of agriculture is rain-fed, is for 3 or 4 months of the year, after which, most of the farmers are idle. So we need to address that and make sure that we maximize and begin to transform the agri sector by mechanizing and innovating around it, so that the farmers are able to work throughout the year. That way they can increase and multiply their earning capacity, which ultimately will result in more activities happening across the economy. Then the fourth and final point that I want to talk about is the issue of attitude. I think Usman referred to this as discipline, but I think I see a relationship between the two, that what we are seeing happening does not really inspire confidence, going forward. I think as Gambians, we need to show that we are patriotic, that the destiny of our country is a concern to us, that the future that we want to leave for the next generation is much better than the one that we are living at the moment, and comparable to what is happening in the other developed and advanced economies. I mean, it is not rocket science. If others can do it, I see no reason why we can't. If you look across Africa, there are a number of countries like Nigeria, where you have a Gambian who is now driving their agricultural policy, I believe. There are talented, experienced, knowledgeable Gambians out there helping other economies to build. I think the government needs to look at that and see how we can tap into the expertise and knowledge and experiences of these Gambians to come and help us address the challenges that we are facing as a country. Because, I mean, if we have this pool of resources available, I see no reason why we should, leave them. We should allow them, to go untapped. And I think there is a lot that can be realized by just engaging with Gambians like this, particularly those in the diaspora, to come home permanently or on short-term assignments, whatever platform that the government can fashion out in order to make sure that they also are able to help in steering the affairs of the country going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Babukar Khan and Mr. Usman Jai, for the words of wisdom. We would now invite Mr. Samate to have the last words.
The last question is how the private sector can be supported. Coming from the government, Ministry of Finance, I would say we recognize some of the challenges, especially those affecting the financial sector. And we are taking steps to help you. I mentioned earlier in my first intervention the infrastructure challenge and how this is needed by all parties, whether it's energy, whether it's soft or hard infrastructure. Now, in the financing landscape, one of the things we have observed, and we're taking steps in these reforms to make sure that we change the laws. But right now, the sectors are not diversified. There are no investment banks in Gambia. There are no development banks. There is a lot that can be done. But the key issue is some of the laws that are currently in place need to adjust. To make sure, for example, the central bank can only license commercial banking. That's why everyone is doing commercial banking. So we recognize the challenges, and I can assure you that steps have been taken to adjust to make sure the government, we can realize our full potential. Another reform initiative which is at advanced stage, we are targeting 1st January 2018 to get started, is the capital markets. Having a capital market will help to connect the savers with the ideas, the people with the money with the people. This is the disconnect right now. There's a total disconnect in Gambia between those that have the money and people that have the ideas. Right? And either, they need each other but there is no infrastructure to make it happen. The diaspora that you're talking, those bonds, all the project bonds, how are you going to organize this without, the infrastructure, the capital market infrastructure to get it done? So we are fully aware. Like I said, both fiscal and monetary policy going forward, since the new administration is being designed to facilitate the private sector, because we know if they make money, we make money. We collect taxes and other things. So we are aware. But we, like Mr. Babukar said, it's important that also the feedback mechanisms are strengthened from both sides, so that we get to know your issues real time and we can address them real time. And we also get ideas from you on what we need to do, because the country belongs to all of us. The country belongs to all of us. So those are just the few things I would like to
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. My last words would be, really, how do we move this country forward? We all have a stake in this. I mean, the banking industry, businesses, the public sector as well. We need to collaborate in a big way to really move the dial forward. And 3 areas again come to mind. First, in the immediate, what will make a difference is, as we are mainly a re-export country, and currently we've got comparative advantage in many areas. Let's continue to build on this, and so that in the short term we'll continue to benefit. But then, at the end of the day, other countries will catch up too. They will get this, they will learn how we go about it, copy the same, and we'll lose that. The ultimate is about really putting the foundation in place in the agricultural sector, in the service industry, in light manufacturing, so that we are able to really move to the next level. Like I said earlier, it has to start with having the right curricula in the schools. It's about having the right, the discipline, the attitude to be able to execute. And it's for the guy who sits in the office to be able to say, I'm here from 8 to 4, I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do today. I'll execute my duties to the best of my ability. Yeah, I would not be really loitering around, and be disciplined, be focused. Even for the cleaner, the guy who works in the bank, having the discipline with the ultimate to satisfy the customer at all times. So if we all go with that mindset, it's going to develop over time. If we go with that mindset, it's inculcated in people, then it makes life a lot easier for all of us. It makes development a lot easier for us. Having said that, I mentioned the line of to access to finance. It's most welcoming that the plans are for to develop a capital market here. It's long overdue, and I think when then you are able to connect, those who want to invest and those who are in need of these funds, and then it will help a great deal. Finally, I think we need to really, Babcock touched on that in terms of really tapping on the talent, Gambian talent that we have out there in the diaspora, even those who have come back home. For those who are out there, I think some years back, it's my understanding Nigeria did the same thing. When they had to tap from the talent in the diaspora, and they linked up with the UNDP to really fund this program, such that these talent were able to come on an STA, short-term assignment, or even take sabbaticals. Yeah, and they will continue to enjoy their salaries and be able to go back, the same salaries that they get in where they're working. So if there's a funding program, if the government can really fashion this out, it will be of immense help, so that they come and contribute their quota.
Thank you, Beatrice, and I want to thank the Chamber for organizing this panel discussion in collaboration with GRTS as part of activities marking the 50th anniversary of the Chamber. But I don't think it should be limited to just the 50th anniversary events. I think this should be an ongoing event. We should try and deepen this relationship with the GRTS and all the media houses to make sure that as I indicated earlier, we continue to share and communicate and engage meaningfully with the business community and the Gambian populace at large. My concluding remarks are basically two. One, as a country, and a developing country for that matter, all our programs should be addressed towards addressing the issue of poverty. All the economic strategies, all the plans, all the private sector activities, if this cannot be translated into improving the living standards of the average Gambians, then it is meaningless. It has no impact, it will bear no fruit, and it will just lead to tension, unrest, and all the undesirable factors that we want in our environment. So the poverty reduction strategies should shape our short, medium, and long-term strategies. Now, addressing poverty is not going to be done overnight. We need to think through and make sure that our leaders really begin to set the right tone and the right agenda in order to inspire the nation, because this is where we are at the moment. We are looking for inspirational leadership in order to galvanize the Gambian population at large, to make sure that we all understand the direction that the executive has in terms of vision for the Gambia, and make sure that we all mobilize our resources and our energies and channel it in the same direction to basically become more action oriented. Elections and the politics should be over now, and what we are looking forward to are meaningful programs that will change and improve positively the lives of the average Gambian, so that we can begin to emerge from our current state as a nation in order to begin to march towards becoming a middle income country within the medium to long term.
Thank you very much, viewers. Thank you very much, panelists. Please stay tuned. We will be coming on air again for another edition of the Business Show next week.